Welcome to the Rewilding Womb, a space where birth, body wisdom, and feminine power are remembered and reclaimed. I'm Sabrina, an out-of-hospital midwife devoted to physiological birth, deep listening, and protecting the sacred threshold of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum.
And I'm Danielle, a photographer and doula, here to witness, support, and document the raw, transformative journey of being a woman. Together, we're having honest conversations about birth, postpartum, boundaries, and what it means to return to our instincts in a modern world.
This is the Rewilding Womb, where we trust birth, honor the mother, and come home to ourselves. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rewilding Womb. Danielle and I are both here with my dear friend, Elena. Elena is a mom of 3 who has been doing a lot of self-discovery and taking the things that she's learned from her very empowering births to step into her authentic self. And although she feels like she's at the very beginning of this journey, she is so much further along than many other ladies. And so we're just wanting to talk with her a little bit, to get to know her a little bit and have her share a little bit of her wisdom about her journey. So I feel like the first question I want to ask is, and I think I know the answer, but just to get started, briefly, we'll just talk about your first child was born in the hospital.
Yes.
And non-traumatic, normal, standard birth. You and I came together at the very end of your second pregnancy because of lots of outstanding circumstances. But ultimately, we had that second baby at home. We were 42 weeks, yes, but we had that baby at home, didn't we? After a very trying while of trusting and timing. And then we had another baby at home, your third child. And the thing is, like, we could delve into all that stuff, and there's a lot of really good details there. But ultimately, the point I'm trying to lead to is the fact that your births and you learning a lot about yourself through your birth journey has helped you in a bigger and deeper journey about learning really who you are and the life you want to live in a much broader and larger sense, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Those were launching pads to my births were launching pads to this journey of discovering my identity and purpose as a mother, which is a really big statement. But what I mean when I say that is just who I am as a mother, who I want to be, what I desire to be as a mother, what I desire to pursue with my family. A lot of that part of me was shrouded by other things, either that the world had told me I was, or my family had told me I was, or I thought were valuable. That it just has been a slow unbecoming and sloughing off of those things to kind of discover my true self. That's such a big statement, but I think it's very common, just as you said, which thank you for having me, and I'm happy to be here. I think it's very common in our culture for people in general, but specifically women, to maybe not have had the opportunity or the guidance to go down that kind of path of self-discovery as a mother. There's a lot of conventional parts of our culture that label motherhood a particular way. And if you're not actively pursuing self-discovery, for me, I just fell into a lot of that without realizing that it wasn't right for me. And then you're living with inner discord when something's not right for you. And that causes its own set of problems in every area of life. And you're like, why do I feel this way? So for me, it still is a process of trying to figure that out.
So with you saying that inner discord, Can you describe that? Because we've tried to touch on that in other episodes, but that inner discord that you felt, probably at the time you didn't realize what it was, but looking back on it, can you tell us how that felt? What was that like?
So I would say first, to give a little bit of background, myself and my husband both come from families with very complex trauma, very complex and difficult relationships, particularly mother to child. Okay. And so for me, I think one thing that took a while for me to identify is I grew up watching people struggle through motherhood. And so you normalize discord and distress to some degree because you're like, oh, this is just really hard.
That's what you see.
This is burdensome work. I would even use that adjective within my family context. Not that I'm not loved. This isn't a criticism of my family. A long line of women who were not seen, supported, and celebrated as mothers. And therefore, on both sides, they turned away from motherhood in ways because it was painful, because it hurt, And so for me, the discord it started as simple as like thoughts of, when I stepped into the last leg of my career and obtained a job I had gunned for and wanted so badly, and everyone told me I'd be so good at. And I did believe I would be good at it. And I thought I would retire from that job. And then the experiences I had there, it just started as a quiet conversation in my mind of like, something's not right. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. It can be a thought that simple. That's kind of how it started for me. And then again, like you had already mentioned, the death of my maternal grandmother, who was a very influential person in my life and very much a maternal figure for my developmental years in a lot of ways, spoke a lot of things over me. When she passed away, the way the Lord set that up was she passed away in her bedroom, and me and my mother and my daughter, who is my youngest child, were all there in that space. So that even was like, it took me a while to come out of the fog, but I knew that was very significant. I knew that was something intentional that had happened, and that it was going to untether me from some things, specifically having to do with motherhood and the generations of women that had come before me and these children that were coming after me. I knew that was really something big, but I didn't immediately understand necessarily. So the discord was just moments of wanting something more as a mother and not even understanding really what that was necessarily. And I had already had these two empowering, I was believing the wrong things about myself. The discord is an incongruence. Incongruence is just like, it's a bad vibration, right? It doesn't feel good. It's an incongruence between what you were made for and what you're pursuing. Okay. And I had experienced in my life several throughout my entire life. Now I see when I looked back, I was always an overachiever with a huge fear of failure. And I would pursue things, but very carefully because I had to get it, right? I couldn't fail. And I had so many opportunities and so many possibilities handed directly to me. I've lived a very blessed life. And so again, I could have this narrative of like, look at this dream job and like, look how blessed I am to have had all these stepping stones. But professionally, it was still falling so flat for me. There was something wrong.
You didn't feel the fulfillment.
I knew what I was focusing on was not the eternal thing that I was to be doing. And I had to hold space for that thought while my oldest child is living his 15th year and thinking, because if you have a fear of failure and you've been, everything you touch turns to gold your whole life, you don't really want to sit with, I'm 15 years into parenting and this is actually not how I wanted to do it. This is not actually the mother that I am and want to be. And had I not had the birth experiences that I had with you 8 and 6 years ago, 8.5 and 6 years ago, those are pieces to a puzzle that has been building in my mind of who I am and what I'm made for, and what are the desires of my heart as a mom. I desire things that I never saw. And so there's this space in your life, there's this waiting period where you have to kind of cognitively figure it out. Because we kind of, as humans, we do what we've seen in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we internalize our family of origin. And some people are like, I'm going to be the exact opposite of my parents. Or some people do everything the exact same way their parents did. I grew up in poverty and trauma. So it's like, I didn't need anybody to tell me that I was supposed to want to do it differently. But I had no idea what that looked like. And I had not had the privilege of, and my mother and my grandmother and her mother before her, and I could say the same thing on my husband's side of his family, but these are women that had not had the privilege to feel loved, seen, and supported and valued in motherhood, and had not been positioned to use their birth and raising children as a way to bring peace, right? Chaos, conflict, pain, unmet desires, unspoken desires, trauma, abuse, all that, right?
So then they're trying to get away from their motherhood.
Right. And you're just trying to get through it. There's a difference between surviving something and doing it intentionally with joy, even though it's hard, right? Because parenting is a mirror. That's the other thing. You know, it just shows you, if you're looking, you will see every part of yourself that is very wounded. And you have to decide what you're going to do with that after you see it. And so for me, I was parenting out of those wounds and out of that trauma, but yet had been to graduate school for marriage and family therapy, right? So obviously you would think a person like that knows a little bit more about family relationships. But there's a space inside of us between knowing and being able to do that takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of support, takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of self-discovery. Those are just not things our culture really values, especially for women that have tried to work full-time and be a full-time mom. And you're a decade and a half in and you're like, and I do want to take a minute to say, I always feel this way when I talk about this. So I don't know if it's just me overthinking it, but that my story is not me saying women can't work or shouldn't work or can't find fulfillment in work. Obviously, you guys, our work is what we spend our time doing. It doesn't have to look like the culture has told us it looks. But for me, I think the simplest way to put it is I thought I was made to go out there and pursue people that needed presence, support, healing, time, and someone to hold space for them. And I was actually supposed to learn how to do all that stuff so I could be a generational curse breaker in my family, which is not the job anybody wants.
And it's such a bigger job.
Yeah.
It's such a bigger job.
And it's just painful because you have to be honest with yourself. And so my husband, again, not to switch gears and get me back on track, but we were so foolish to jump into being like, okay, well, we'll just be a one-income homeschooling family and we'll figure this out. You can do that. But we did not take the time to look at who we are and what we believe about ourselves and the wounds that we still carried from our childhood. We really did not take inventory of those the way that it is prudent to do before you start raising.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So then you're doing it during. And so for him, that 5 years of him standing in that mirror, that was his discord of he's like, something's wrong. Like this is painful.
So you feel like when you made that decision to leave your career, that you just threw your whole family overboard. You keep using the term with me over the last several months. Like, I feel like I'm swimming upside down in the ocean. And your whole family is just like, okay, we're doing something. It's really, really, really hard and terrifying right now. But we know it's better for us in the long run. And that is the thing about stepping into your authentic self and living who you are really put on this earth to be is it can be very scary. And that's why people tend to step back into comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be so much more comfortable to not say, let's examine some of these things and say, are we parenting intentionally? Are we creating what we desire? Or are we just reacting and doing whatever's on autopilot? That's a lot of it for us in this season. Now that we've had these big revelations, it's the day-to-day of like, What does our household look like? How does it run? What's the rhythm of it? What's the harmony of it? What's our schedule look like? How do we do this? What kind of structure are we giving our kids? I think a lot of it, like, it's not to say that we haven't been trying to do these things, but things have been revealed now that make it look different. And you're like, oh, and you just approach it with a different heart attitude because you see its eternal value differently. So that we didn't care about parenting or any, from the outside, they're just like a normal family. But when you come into the walls and you start looking with an analytical eye, so much of what I think we have done has not been intentional. It's been reactive, and it's been doing what's comfortable or familiar. And then again, we've got that discord of like, everybody else's kid is doing this, but I feel this way when we allow this, and so it's just learning to trust yourself, which is, again, had I not gone through that with you twice in birth, where you have to say intentionally, I'm going to surrender these things and I'm going to trust my body. That set me up to gain so much confidence in myself and my body. And I needed that to propel me on to do some of these bigger things that I had no idea were coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like with boundary work too, like for each woman, I feel it's a little different and how we journey through our lives and things that we have gone through in our childhood. Like for me, mine was abandonment. Mm-hmm. I was afraid of being abandoned. So like I tried to connect with people that weren't the greatest for me because I was afraid of losing them. Yes. And so that kept me in this continuous spiral of like seeking someone, wanting the reassurance, wanting their love and their approval, but not understanding who I was truly as a person. Yep. And so when we look at sicknesses, discord, we were talking about discord and sicknesses, we look at people that have autoimmune disorders and chronic illness. And I look back when I was a child, I was sick often. All the time. And I suffer from some autoimmune disorders. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's genetics at play in there too, but there's things that needs to activate those genes for them to become alive. Yes. And so I've been like looking more into that and how keeping things within creates those flares. And so that has been a lot of work over the last couple years, even. So I have been able to sit with myself more and raise my children differently into what their needs are. Because again, they are two separate, different human beings. Yes. And so it's like understanding who they are and sitting with them and just being present. Because I feel like another thing too, as women, as moms, we're always looking at the future. We're always like overthinking things like, oh, what if this happens? What if this, what if I take this direction or take this step? Or what if they're going out and doing things and you're just constantly overthinking. And so I have had to step back and be present more. And so this has been a rediscovering phase for me. And then talking with Sabrina over this and doing this podcast and reflecting and hearing stories from like people like you, I'm just in awe that it's out there. Yeah. We're not alone in this. No. We're not alone in this thought process. Because for me, I was like, am I the only one that thinks this way? And I didn't have that connection with other people that felt that way for so many years. Yeah. My grandmother raised me as well because I was at her house a lot. And I'm very thankful because I got a version of my grandmother that my mom didn't get. Yeah. That she had 9 children and my mom was the youngest. And the version I saw from my grandmother was the version that she was all those years, but her husband was not the best, not the greatest. And there was a lot of abuse and emotional abuse that happened in that household. But when he passed away, my grandmother was able to flourish into who she truly was. So even those last 20 years, I was able to see my grandmother for who she was. And so I was raised by a woman that I wished her children would have seen. Yeah. Because that probably would have healed so much within them. And I think that without my grandma guiding me in that way, I wouldn't be where I am today. Because she was able to help me tap into that intuition and like speak on the land and the beauty and the garden and the flowers and the birds and the animals. Like she was just very in tune with the world around her. And she took time. She was present. She was released. She was safe.
Yeah.
And just to see that version of a woman that changes from being not a mother, but a wife, to a mother of 9, and then a grandmother, and then having her self-discovery that happened in her 70s.
That's so profound.
It's just to see that evolution from a woman.
You're making me think of how people talk about being a grandparent and how it's so much better, more beautiful. Yeah. And I think what it's hitting on, what you are hitting on, and what we're trying to do, and maybe not wait until we're grandparents to do it.
Yes.
That's what we're just rolling back the timeline, but it's this sense of being released from the constraints that were binding you up and making kind of however you're approaching parenthood so stressful. And sometimes it's life circumstances or stressful relationships or abusive relationships. There's all sorts of different things that can oppress that life-giving beauty within a woman. Yeah. There's so many things that can bind that up. But I think people love grandparenthood because they're far enough along in their life and their journey of self-discovery, generally speaking, to be a little freer and to love a little fuller. Yes. And to think, man, I wish I would have loved my own kids this way. And so like women like you and I and women everywhere that are having these realizations while we are still parenting young children, it feels very like it's a blessing to have it revealed to you because you can't change what you don't see. But it's also, there's this feeling of like, I don't know, for me anyway, of just like, okay, I'm late to the game. I got to get my ducks in a row here. I got to start living the way, and it's a process, and you have to have so much grace and so much time. And I have to remind myself all the times that this may be so messy, but I wonder how that will play out in the next generation. And I have to just think of it that way because it's not about me. No. It's about how my children can step into parenting, feeling more purposeful, equipped, and centered than I ever did. Every woman before me for at least 5 generations had their first child before they were 20. I was 28 when I had my first child. And I still was light years away from being what I would objectively call like emotionally mature and healed enough to like care for another human in a comprehensive and loving way. Like there's so much sacrifice with motherhood and parenting that like, I didn't think of it that way. I was just like, I put 10 more years in there of maturity and development and still, looking back.
So I just have to say something, hopefully to encourage you and all these other moms out here that are like, oh no, what am I doing? Am I ruining these children? Listen, I was that young mom. I was done having babies almost shortly after you started having babies. Right. But the thing is, like, our children are going to see our intent and our heart. And I remember those years where I was finally like, had a whole house full of kids and start just beginning that journey of like, trying to become a better human and trying to break the generational curses. And for me, it was in smaller little bits because I had always kind of lived an authentic life of like being the rebellious one and just doing it my way. But we all still have those things that we are just doing because that's what was familiar to us. Mm-hmm. And so I remember and just like, just like praying like, dear God, please help me because I am screwing up all day, every day with these kids. Mm-hmm. And now most of my kids are all grown. And the thing is, they are so resilient. And if your heart is right towards them and you just love them with everything you are. And it doesn't matter if you have 3 children or 2 children or 8 children, that love does not like go down when you have more. Like it's like more and more that bubbles up out of you. But the thing is, like, they are so resilient and forgiving. And it's like, to this day, I'm like apologizing to my adult kids, like, I am so sorry I did that. And they're like, Mom, it's fine. Like, we're fine. Like, I don't know why you're so hung up on this. Like, we're okay. And so just understand that if your intention is good, your children see that. And especially as they grow and they mature and they look at the world around them and they're like, Mom, or, whoever else in our life was not perfect, but she did the best she could with what my mother did not ever try to break generational curses. I think all three of us are like, we are those generational curse breakers. And that in and of itself is huge work. It is huge work. But some of us just have this deeper calling that is inside of us that pushes us and propels us to do the harder work so that our children can have an example and then they will be able to live more authentically. It's like we take these little examples of birth and we use them in bigger life examples. And it's like I'm always telling families, like, your children being aware and especially present when you birth your child in your safe space and in your power, it will change the way they view birth for the rest of their lives. And they won't have all the garbage they have to overcome to get there to have their babies in that way. And so it's the same way with us. It's like, you're doing so much work. I have done so much work. Danielle has done so much work to break these generational curses. And we're doing it for us and for our children. Right. And the thing is, like, your children are going to be so much better off because of it. They're going to be so much further down the road and be willing to step into doing the hard work because they see the benefits of it. Yeah. And so just my encouragement is they're resilient. As long as your intent is right and it's all about love and trying to do what's right for them, they're going to see all of that, and they're going to grow up and be an adult, and you're going to be like I am all day, every day. Like, how in the world do I have the privilege of being the mother to these they're not perfect humans, but I like to think they are. It's just an amazing honor. And I also just have to speak to the comment about grandparent life, because I have 9 of them now. Yeah. The 10th will be coming in March or April, and so it's just a matter of like, yes, it does. To me, when my first grandchild was born, and I had the blessed honor of being the midwife that was there to help catch that baby, but I felt like I love this child just like she's my own. Mm-hmm. But then there's a freedom that, wait, the molding and shaping of her is not my responsibility. I already did that 8 times. It is like, I love this child just like she's my own. And that love still is there for all of them. But the bigger responsibilities are not mine. Yeah. And some people will say those responsibilities are like waking up in the middle of the night, having to raise them and all that stuff. No. The bigger responsibility is the molding and shaping and training of that human being. That's not my job, because that child was not entrusted to me. Although I'm second removed, that child was entrusted to my child. And all I have to do is rest in faith and trust that I did as good as I could with my own children, that they're going to continue that journey with theirs. Yeah. And I have been so blessed to see that, at least in the last almost 9 years. And so, yeah, it's different phases of life, but it's all the same journey of like, let's just go ahead and do the hard, bigger work. And some things we just have to have faith that as long as we're doing the very best we possibly can, it is all going to work out.
Yeah. And I like that. I like that you said that you're leaving it. It's your child's. Like, that's their child to raise and to mold. And I feel like we're talking about boundaries again. Is
And respecting your child's boundaries to raise their own child in their own way.
So let's go back on that a little bit, because we're talking about postpartum periods with grandparents and mother-in-laws, father-in-laws. You know, how some people want to continue to mold even their grandchildren and in toxic ways.
Ooh, yeah.
And so like that was one of my discoveries too, was after I've had my kids, is like I've had to set some boundaries in how my parents or, in-laws, or how they talked to my kids, because I didn't want them to feel like how I did as a child. I want them to develop their own personality and be who they truly are without having to put on a mask to please someone.
Yeah.
Because obviously you're going to raise your children to be respectful and to trust their intuition and to, be nice to others, but then there's also boundaries that they have to learn as well, because you're not going to want to take people that are going to take advantage of you, or be nice to people that are going to take advantage of you. So like kids, especially teenagers, I feel like that's something that we're navigating with right now, is understanding what boundaries are, or understanding what apologies mean, what it means, what it truly means. Because I don't remember ever being told as a teen from my mother, I'm sorry for how I reacted. I don't have ever heard the word I'm sorry ever. And I don't know how many times I've had to I get on the floor with my teen and I sit there and I look at her and I'm saying, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
How I raised my voice, or I said something that is not how I should have treated you. Mm-hmm. And that almost feels like a pit in my stomach when I'm doing that, because it's new to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is this feeling?
Absolutely.
And it's emotion. But I can see now, after doing that the last couple years, and my daughter, she got, angry the other day. And I'm saying this, but like, teenager girls, where you have hormones going on. And she said some stuff, and she came into me. I was in the bedroom and she came into me and she was fumbling with some laundry. And she looked at me and she said, Mom, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry for what I said. Ooh. And I was like, wow. And that just shows you the respect that, that is created when you just nurture your children that way. And what I just wish I would have, I craved so much in my life. And I just hope this continues and it blossoms and it grows. And so, yeah, definitely. I feel like with boundaries in place and talking with women about that, and understanding if they're feeling a certain way postpartum, and they have people coming in and visiting baby, or even into toddlerhood when they're toddlers and they're in school and they start feeling a certain way when the grandparents are saying something to their child. Don't ignore that. Listen to that, sit with that, journal it, write it down, and say, I didn't like this feeling or what they just said. Write down what they said, right? And go back and read it and say, I don't want this to happen again, and create those boundaries in that way. And it's scary. It can be so scary, because you risk, if they are not emotionally, what's that word I'm looking for? Not emotionally intelligent, but like, mature, emotionally mature, willing to make some changes or listen to you, they can distance themselves. Absolutely. And so if you have that fear of abandonment, that is going to trigger that like no other. Absolutely. And that has happened to me over and over and over and over again. And it's still happening to me. And I still try to reach out. And my oldest daughter told me the other day, because I said, I reached out to grandma, or I reached out and I wrote some words. And my oldest said, you need to let her go, Mom. You need to let her go. Wow. I love that you at your age can understand that boundary before I can.
Right. Wow, that's so profound. You touched on so many things that I can relate to, and it keeps bringing me back to the understanding that this is absolutely boundary work, because it's work about negotiating your relationships with your children, your parents, and otherwise the world and what it demands of you, and feeling confident enough to know that you can set those boundaries. Even though it's scary, especially I have a huge fear of emotional abandonment. I was a very difficult child. I'm now raising 2 children with that temperament, and I see from a completely different angle. But for me, my parents and the adults around me did not have the skills and the support to know how to nurture me in a way. It was either indulge my every demand to get some silence, which we know how that turns out with kids and dynamics, or I would get emotionally rejected because I was just too much. My desires were too big. My demands were too much. My voice was too loud. I was just a very bold, intense child, I think, that demanded a lot from my very broken, very weary adults around me. And so it was just like, to lean in and to try to guide me, and then to do the inevitable repair work. When you talk about repair work and the beauty that it's giving you with your parenting relationships, sometimes my husband and I will just sit and dwell on that for a while. Because when we feel so overwhelmed, like the wave is too big, we have to just sit and say, you know what, we put so much time and capacity into repair work, and we know that's important. It's mundane, and it can feel like you're trudging through mud. And sometimes I make jokes. I'm like, nobody told me repair work with my 15-year-old was actually going to be the full-time job when I came home. And then you're trying to scramble and make sure your other kids have what they need from you. But that repair work is so important. And sometimes it feels like that's all you're doing, and you can get really discouraged because you're like, why do I keep messing up? But we can't forget that is so huge, because it shows them life is messy. You're going to mess up. How are you going to repair it with those closest to you? Yes. Right? How are you going to rebuild the trust and the emotional intimacy? Come from a long line of families who could not build trust and emotional intimacy because they were so scared, hurt, and dysregulated. We don't have to do it that way. Right. But it's going to be, we say uncomfortable. You're in a series or a transition phase of life when your daydreams take you to like book titles, because you're like, what's the theme of every thought that runs through my head right now? And I always go back to this, like, intentional tension, right, is a phrase that goes through my head a lot, because it would be so much more comfortable, I think, to ignore some of this stuff, and you can't solve it all in one day. As my husband will be like, one thing at a time, I'll get to like going. And he's like, all that's true, but we can't do all that today. Right. But what we can do and he's really good about that. But it would be a lot easier to just lean away from all of this stuff. It's really painful. Facing ways we've been emotionally abandoned that we didn't deserve. And for me, I don't want to speak for you, but then looking at how I've taken that emotional abandonment into my own parenting, and I will abandon my own kids when I'm flooded because my wounds are still over here needing to be dressed, bandaged, and healed. Yes. Right? It's overwhelming, but it's also super freeing because it gives you the ability to say, okay, I see it now. Yeah. One day at a time.
And that's communication too with your kids. Like, I've learned that a lot with my girls. Like, my mom would shut down, and I understand why this happened. And there was parts of me that was starting to, when I was younger as like a new mom, I felt like there was parts where I was starting to shut down. And I didn't understand what healthy communication was. Yeah. Even with my partner, like, I didn't know what healthy communication was. It was not showed to me as a child. So like, I was like, okay, I'm learning this from like the ground up. So like, here we are. I'm like, I am learning, I'm turning through this life, and I'm trying to understand from all different perspectives, because everyone does have a different view of like what they are, who they're who they are as a person and how they react to certain things. We all have differences in, like we were talking about love languages and our attachment styles and how we react to certain traumas or information that is being given to us, or even societal media, things like that influences us in so many different ways. But like I had to basically, with my girls, now that they're older, I communicate. When I'm feeling a certain way now, I'll be like, I'm going to step away and go outside and take some deep breaths. I am not angry at you guys right now, but I feel a lot of emotion in my body. I need to go, or I need to move. I need to go for a walk, or I just communicate and not just leave and be like, and then come back and sit with them and talk with them, or let's go somewhere. Let's go together. Like my love language is quality time. So that was probably another thing with the abandonment things. Cause like I craved quality time with my caregivers. And so, I just feel that way when I'm able to communicate that with my girls. They don't have that sense of abandonment.
Right.
They know that mom's going to come back. Mom's going to talk with us. Mom's going to sit with us. And, but like, again, I've had to work through that because I feel like my oldest I went through postpartum depression after I had my second. And so she was 3 at the time when I was going through postpartum depression. And that 3-year range, I feel like they're, wanting that attachment to their mom. And she's a toddler and she's very like stimulated. She's excited. She's hyperactive. She runs around. She loves to do all the things. She's talk. She's always been a talker ever since she can. And, but I was going through a really dark season in my life while trying to raise a toddler and have my baby that was wanting to be attached to me 24/7. So I was getting overstimulated. But how do you talk to a toddler about what you're feeling when you don't even realize what you're feeling? Right. And I feel like there was a lot of trauma that happened to my oldest in that time frame. And now I'm looking back and I felt so much shame that I did this. I caused these issues. I did her, the way she reacts to certain things, and I've had to have that conversation with her.
Yeah. Talk about generational curses.
Yeah.
Shame.
Yes.
Women in a cycle of trying to do and failing in motherhood and feeling ashamed. And again, for me, thank you for sharing that. I was really, and everything you're saying is resonating with me so much and helping me organize my own thoughts. I come from a long line of women who have carried a lot of shame about a lot of different things. And you just, man, the way that we carry that, and especially if we don't know we're carrying it, it shapes our thoughts about ourselves and others and our ability to meet people and just connect even. It shrouds all of it. So that's a huge theme that I feel like sloughing off too, is just the shame of all the things that we're carrying and many of which were not any of our own doing, right? The shame that you carry when you craved connection with your grown-ups and they did not have the capacity for it. The message you get is there's something wrong with me. Right. You don't want to connect with me. Right. So healing that like inner child within myself, because emotional abandonment is a huge wound for me. And then I kind of, my parents were so young, and they are like just the turning away or the avoiding, right? That's a style that you use to deal with, for whatever reason, better or worse. I'm a turn towards, it's not going to be fun and I'm probably going to pick a fight with you, but I am just a turn towards pursuer, People have used the word aggressive. There's just been a lot of different ways that are being refined within me, but
I can relate.
Yeah. And so I married also an avoider who had carried a lot of pain and a lot of shame, but he did, when I get triggered, I'm going to turn towards him and we're going to start talking. When he gets triggered, he's going to turn away. Well, what does that do? That makes me feel like, little girl, Elena, who I'm like, why are my adults all turning away from me?
Yes.
You know, I must be too much. And then different ways that now that I have the eyes and I can, with grace, be like, ooh, I accidentally was also carrying along that message.
Yeah.
And just this idea, you talked about the grandparents of breaking generational chains being a process that happens in stages, right? It can be big, dramatic moments. And I think an empowered, supported, peaceful birth experience is a huge, true example of that. But it can also be in little daily decisions. And, you know, I'll shout out my mom right now because she's going through her own, I think, very similar experience to me. She's in her early 60s. I'm in my early 40s. We joke a lot about being late bloomers. We joke a lot about growing up together. She truly was a child when I was born. And she had a very, very complicated relationship with her mother. My Nana did not treat me the way that she treated my mother. So I relate to that. But just the ways, you know, my mom has been so careful, and you've met my mom. She was at both of the births that you attended. And the way that she, you know, she's got her own things she's struggling through, but that's huge when we can do something that we had never seen. My mom was never nurtured, loved, and supported the way that she deserved to be ever through any stage of life, but particularly through pregnancy, childbirth, and those early years. There just was no wisdom, comfort, or love coming to wrap their arms around my mother and to walk her through that profound experience. And so the ways that she's done that for me with, I know, never seeing it is just, that's such a huge part of the story. And the way that she has been so careful. My Nana had dominion over us in a way that was very toxic. I felt at a younger age, it was almost like my parents were kind of like more like siblings. They didn't have any authority over me or in the household. My Nana had that. And it was whatever Elena wants, Elena gets. So it was just a very disordered, setup relationally. And she would come right in and just undermine my parents. It didn't matter what they said. If I wasn't happy, she'll come right in the room and be like, no, Elena's gonna, and that's kind of how I grew up, which gives you a very distorted sense of self and the role you play in the family and respect and relationships and importance. But like the way I have seen my mom be so careful to collaborate with my husband about her relationship with the kids and just what they can and cannot do or whatever, or she has taken so much care in her relationship with them to respect us. And just as you're talking about that realization is hitting me. It was just like, that's such a huge part of her story as a chain breaker, because it was almost like my Nana enjoyed kind of undermining her. It was almost like, it was like a power play. And she has never brought that in. And she's gone even further to step up alongside me and walk through a birth experience that was very different than anybody in my family had ever done. And she did that with love and support and confidence in me. That, again, looking back, had my mother been like, I don't think you should do this, or I don't think you can do this, or spoken any kind of negativity over this desire that blossomed in my heart, and then like the Lord sent Sabrina to like bring it to fruition for me, I don't know if how I would have walked through it. But I got to do that knowing that not only did I have this relationship with you to walk me through that I felt so secure in, even though we had just met each other. It's just so wild. It's so divine, every minute of it. But it's like my husband and my mother, which I think are probably my two most intensely influential relationships in my life, other than my children, were both there willingly with the same beautiful, peaceful confidence that I was able to bring into that. And man, was that powerful, because neither side of our family has ever experienced anything like that, as far as just holding that kind of space for the sacredness of birth and what it truly is. We've distorted it so much, and particularly in my family, I feel like it was really distorted. So that empowered, peaceful birth was, again, the catalyst for so much of this, because it showed me, hey, this is actually my heart's desire, and I am actually wildly capable to do this with the right self-care and support circle around me. But also, like, it showed me that these other people in my family, my husband and my mother, who were also walking out of so much brokenness when it came to the parent-child relationship, were also attracted to that and wanted to be part of it. And just, sometimes in families you hear like people say, I think I want to have a home birth, and everybody's got a lot of big opinions, and it can even like set up these like adverse corners in families of like, I didn't experience any of that. Everybody was like, oh, this is what we're doing? Okay, yeah, let's do it. And then just like moved in and did it. And it was like, whoo, wow. That was a really big deal.
I look at things like that, and I believe that there's some type of orchestration to support certain big events in your life, because it is going to be a catalyst for you. It's like there's some kind of divine energy that helped orchestrate that without a lot of friction, because that was one of the big things to help you step into even the bigger work that you were put here to do. And then in other families, sometimes, like you said, there is a lot of friction. There is a lot of difficulty in just making that decision to birth somewhere besides of a hospital. But that's the beauty of each individual and how our lives are so unique and so it's just like what you said earlier about like, I'm not advocating that women should not work. Like it's like we're talking about living an authentic life and looking at those little circumstances that we as individuals have experienced to like mold us and shape us and direct us into who we really are and who we are meant to be. And that none of us are supposed to be cookie cutters, like copies of anybody else. That we're not wanting to like live a life that looks like someone else's. We want all women to slow down, to tune in, to pay attention to what your inner self is trying to say, and maybe look at how events and things have been orchestrated around you to mold you and shape you and push you in certain directions. And I mean, I could tell tons of stories about things like that in my own life that are just like, why was that? Like that particular thing should have been a whole lot harder, and it really wasn't. And it's just a matter of like, those are little things that direct us. And, it's just so interesting to see how our lives are so unique and so beautiful, and that they start going better if we start slowing down to listen to like if we feel like life is beating us up, like let's slow down, let's step back, let's tune in to yourself to say, okay, am I supposed to be doing something different? Am I, it's just so interesting to me.
It really is. And it's only through hindsight, which we all have many more years ahead of us for that. So again, like in the middle of a transition is an interesting time to reflect, because in a year or 2 or 3, I'm sure we would all have so much, it always grows. But, and it can be so encouraging to take those moments to reflect on the hindsight of the orchestration of things, because it just adds to that inner knowing of like the bigger purpose, right? That this is all for. And yeah, shame is a huge generational curse theme in my family, and so is fear. So again, I think out of hospital births, for lots of cultural and conventional reasons, elicit fear in people. And so like just reveling in the miracle as we're talking about it of my particular family, who like the current Nana's currency was fear and worry. It's not just how we controlled everyone, but it controlled her. And she suffered through a lot of trauma and a lot of like horrific crises. So like, I understand how she got there, but like that really was a ruling force. So to be able to come into my family and be like, hey, I'm going to do this, and to have it be such a chaotic time. My husband had just been diagnosed with cancer, and then he quickly had surgery to have a kidney removed. And I was, at the very end of my pregnancy looking for a new birth plan. It all could have gone so much differently and had so much more fear and pushback and discouragement, but it didn't. Even to go 42 weeks is like, people are, even people who like profess and live in this world, you get there and you're just like, oh, when's this baby coming? But we needed that time. My husband's 4 weeks out of surgery of having a kidney removed. And, we're getting to know each other, and it's just like immediate trust and connection was there. But then it gave us 4 or 5 weeks of her building on that and me settling into the confidence that I was like, it looked so crazy from the outside when I would tell people about, we're actually going to have the baby. People were like, but it didn't feel that way. It actually felt very just peaceful, exactly as it should have been.
I think that's like you had mentioned earlier about puzzle pieces. These things, it's like you said, they're puzzle pieces that you can only see and really identify later on, years later, looking back on it. You're like, oh, that was a little piece that went there and that went here. Yeah.
I strive to understand, right? I don't know if you guys can relate, but I'm such a big picture thinker. And I'm like, I need to understand why. So I think that's why hindsight feels like such a gift to me. Because it's almost like the Lord is like, okay, I'll show you a little bit here. And I'm like, oh my gosh. He's like, right? And it kind of keeps you going because you're like, wow. Okay. It just feels really profound as a way to see how it all fits together. Yeah. And we're still becoming that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just have one more question for you, and then we need to wrap it up. But I know that some of this stepping into your authentic self and making decisions for who you really feel like is aligned with who you are deeper is kind of new and fresh for you in the last year. Like when you talk about the career change and things like that. But when you listened to that and you started responding to that, and we use the term of like flipping the family upside down and feel like you're upside down in the ocean. So that's but tell me about what you feel. I'm trying to get to the point of like helping other women identify when you are on the right path. You know what I mean? Like it does feel chaotic and kind of, whoa, this is kind of woozy and crazy. But now that you're walking that, how do you know that this is the right direction? And that right direction may be right for now, and it might change in a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 from now. But what kind of things are you thinking and feeling now that tells you I am on the right path? I am going in the right direction that feels more like who I authentically am?
Great question. Because I think we are always looking for that validation when you're doing something that takes a lot of courage. And so what those moments have looked like for me, I think really are spring from the same wellspring that came to be through my births. That's why it's all connected, is because setting my mind to pursue that desire for my birth and then walking through it and having it happen as it did, set up the pillars inside of me that I think all of this knowing would then kind of hang on. And so for me, it's the moments where I feel, even in the midst of chaos, even in intentional tension, where the day-to-day part, can have my husband and I feeling discouraged if we let it go there, because it is, just hard work and a lot of trust and a lot of persevering through things and a lot of having the same conversation over and over again. But it's the moments where I feel that inner courage and confidence again that I think is connected to that same pillar that came through my birth experiences of just like a knowing that it is right, a knowing that there will be fruit from this, maybe in my life, but especially in future generations. But that's just because something is hard doesn't mean it's wrong. And I think that's a tricky thing in our culture, because our culture is pushing us into a lot of things that are really hard that are actually wrong. Right. But there's a path of life where you are pursuing, I think, what is ultimately transformative and transcendent and eternal for you. And when you get on that path, you get a gift, which is kind of like a peace in the quiet moments of like, I know this is right. Like I said, I've never been a big decision maker. So even just this seed of leaving my job kind of started as joking, because we were just, the people that I worked with and the work we were doing was beating us up so much. And we were so overwhelmed and we were in such discord and dysfunction, and then my family's in discord and dysfunction. And I was like, well, I can't do this job anymore. I got to leave. And it's like, where am I going to go? Am I going to go home? Like, it's just, now in hindsight, I see it's the same work, just in a different place with different people. And I feel so much peace being there, even though it's hard. But I hesitate when people are like, how's it? You see people and they know your life has changed a lot. And I'm connected to a lot of people. Some I've known since high school. Some are newer, and you just see people and you're like, how are things? And you're like, if you're me, in your mind, you're like, how do I answer this? How do I answer this? Because you want to be dramatic, but you also want to be authentic. Yeah. Because I just really value that. And so it's like, I worry, like when I go on and on about how like gruelingly hard it is, people are like, well, maybe it's not right. And it's like, no, that's not it. No. This is actually like refining. Yes. It hurts.
Okay. So what you were saying is that if you feel like there's just an inner knowing and a peace, even amongst the chaos, because things are so kind of turbulent, but there's this deeper inner sense of peace and knowing.
And little moments, right? Little flecks of my relationship with my children or my relationship with my husband, and watching how that is transforming and getting deeper, the emotional intimacy and the trust. Some things are having to be torn down so they can be rebuilt, but also things are being built. And when you see glimpses of that, it's like, oh, okay, thank you. It's like, it gives you that perseverance to keep walking that very hard path, right?
Yeah.
There is, again, all walks of life have value and importance, and every person has dignity in their own story. Mm-hmm. But for me, like a tagline that has just stuck with me is like, yeah, it would be a lot easier to like send my kids other places all day long and go deal with other people's problems that I don't have emotional stake in, and I don't have to take accountability in, and I don't have to do repair work in. But that's not actually what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm actually supposed to come home and walk that out with the people closest to me, and deal with my own harm and deal with their harm and flourish and grow and thrive in the ways that really like bring our true purpose to fruition. And it would be a lot easier not to do it, but it's so beautiful to do it. So I think, just to not be long-winded, the answer to your question is the moments, whether it just almost at the end of the day feels like a whisper from God of like, you're doing good, or like, keep going. Sometimes that's what or my husband acknowledging something that like I didn't say was really hard for me, but man, it was really hard. Mm-hmm. Even just last night, I'm walking through a kitchen. He's like, good job not reacting to that. And I'm like, thank you. It's just those little moments where you're like, yeah, okay, just little fruit, bearing little fruit. It's got a long way to go. And some of that fruit's not going to come until the next generation and the ones after that. But you see those moments and you're like, this was the right choice. Yeah.
I love it.
For that.
I love it. I love it.
Great conversation.
I feel like you have so many little nuggets of just wisdom that are going to be so, so helpful to other moms and other women who are just trying to find their place in the world, because we have so much where we're just trying to not, and we talk about it all the time. We're not only breaking down what was put into our subconscious mind by our own upbringing and our parents, but then again, there's that other outside layer of society and society's expectations, and it's a lot. It is a lot to overcome and work through, and to just find out who you are. And so, yeah. Thank you so much for coming to share.
Thank you guys for having me. And this has been a really beautiful experience that has, again, revealed more. That's the other like transcendent thing about getting together with other women and sharing your stories is it adds to your own story in ways that you weren't expecting, or even shows you, something deeper about yourself that really is a gift. So thank you both.
Yes.
You're so welcome.
You're welcome. Yeah. All right.